Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and I was always told I had a voice radio, so today we are talking about a very, very nice new supporter card coming out. It is Acerola, and ladies and gentlemen, this is a very, very good supporter card. It allows you to just choose one of your Pokemon with any damage counters on it, and just return that Pokemon and all cards attached to it to your hand. That is crazy, crazy good. Now, we've seen a bunch of cards like this in the past. We have seen Scoop Up Cyclone, which allowed you to just pick up a Pokemon. But, of course, that was an A-Spec, so you could only have one A-Spec in your deck. And a lot of people wanted to use cards like Computer Search or Dowsing Machine instead. We had Poketurn, which just allowed you to pick up a Pokemon. Well, that actually wasn't true. It was an SP Pokemon, mostly used to pick up Crobat G and reuse the ability, but still a good card. We had Super Scoop Up, which allows you to pick up any Pokemon you like, so long as you can flip a heads first. And we've got AZ, which allows you to pick up a Pokemon, but the really bad thing about AZ is that you have to discard any cards attached to said Pokemon. So you can pick up your Pokemon, but you lose the double colourless energy and the float stone, for argument's sake. Now, Acerola is a really good card, and as with all supporters, don't forget that it can be reused with Versus Seeker. So you can play one or two and just grab it when you need it with Versus Seeker. And now that we got Tapu Lele, you can actually search it reliably from the deck using Tapu Lele as well. Now, there are many, many uses for a card like this, and I'm not saying I'm going to go through every single one. What I am going to do is go through a few of the uses people might make of this card. Now, first of all, we've got to mention, I'm not going to say this every time, there has got to be damage counters on the Pokemon. So if you really want to pick up your Pokemon in the active to move it, but there's no damage on it, you can't do that. Which means that good players are going to start making sure that they're not damaging Pokemon that might otherwise be an Acerola target. There we go. So, first thing you can do, you can heal Pokemon. But not only can you heal them, you can reset. So let's say you've got a Decidueye with 120 damage on. Well, as long as you've got something like, let's say, a Vileplume with a Float Stone, you can use Acerola, pick up the Decidueye, but then you can immediately play down the Rowlet, the Dartrix, the Decidueye, so you immediately evolve up into Decidueye again, oh yeah, and you get to reattach one energy that you picked up with it. Very, very nice indeed. But remember, if you want to do this, you've got to have a free retreater like Mew, or you've got to have a Floatstone on a Pokemon, because even when you pick up your Pokemon, you've got to then get it back into the active. Although I suppose you could use something like a Switch instead. You can get rid of a Pokemon you didn't want to start with or have active, as long as it's got damage on. So let's say you're playing a Volcanion deck, you start with the EX, but you want to start with the non-EX. Well, you can attach an energy to that Volcanion EX, and then if your opponent does some damage, then the following turn you pick up Volcanion EX, and then you've got that energy to attach to the incoming non-EX Volcanion. It means you don't have to be thinking, oh, I can't put the energy on here. You can, because you can reset it later on, although that will obviously take your attachment for the turn. You can get a Pokemon out of the active, and here we're really thinking Vileplume. One of the things with Vileplume is it's got a huge retreat cost, so before you evolve into Vileplume, you need to get a Floatstone down, because after you've evolved you can't play a Floatstone because it's an item. Well, what people used to do was play AZ, so they could just pick up the Vileplume when they needed to. That option has gone away. Acerola now fills that gap. However, it's got to be made clear that if that Vileplume has no damage on it, you can't use Acerola. Like I said, I'm going to stop saying that, but when I do stop saying it, you all know. You've got this. And of course, if you are picking up a Vileplume, you can actually use that to your advantage. You pick up Vileplume, then you get to use items, and then when you've played enough items, you can just put down the Oddish and evolve straight up into a Vileplume. And here's the brilliant thing. Let's say you didn't get a Floatstone on Vileplume first time round. Well, now you can pick up that Vileplume, get your items, and put a Floatstone down before you evolve into Vileplume. Now, I know there's got to be damage on the Vileplume, but this is going to be so good for Vileplume decks. It means you're not going to want to try and KO that Vileplume on the deck for fear of having your opponent play an Acerola. You can use this to move energy from one Pokemon to another. Oh, I've got a Shaman with 20 damage, pick it up with the double colourless, put the double colourless onto a Tauros. You can use it to reuse tools, pick up a damaged Pokemon that had a Floatstone on, and now add on a Fighting Fury belt instead. And you can reuse coming into play abilities. I'm thinking generally Shaman and Tapu Lele here, but there might be others. Your opponent damages Tapu Lele but doesn't KO it. You can then pick it up with Acerola, and then you can play it back down again, using the ability a second time. There is so much you can do with this card. It is so good. And you can reuse it with Versus Seeker. Now, I know that the requirement that the Pokemon you pick up must have damage counters on it will limit the use a little bit, but it's still not the end of the world by any stretch of the imagination, ladies and gentlemen. This is really, really good, and it will see a huge amount of play. And the best part of this is being able to reset, getting rid of damage but keeping your energy and your tools. Or getting rid of a damaged Pokemon and then putting the energy and tools that was on it onto a new Pokemon. This is a very, very easy 5 Wasi card. And I don't have to think too hard about that. If it didn't have the requirement that the Pokemon must be damaged, it would basically be broken. As it is, most of the time, the Pokemon you're going to want to pick up has got damage on anyway. And even if your opponent doesn't damage a Vileplume because they don't want you to play an Acerola, brilliant. They're not taking out your Vileplume. This is a very good card. It's going to see an awful lot of play. Now, you know the deal, ladies and gentlemen. There is a comment section. Go nuts. Be nice. There are buttons to both like this video and subscribe to this channel. And if I was you, I would already have used them both. But you can use them now. I'm cool with that. Don't forget, you can follow me on Twitter @TheWazzy. And the most important thing, as it always will be, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.